Have you ever felt the weight of unforgiveness? It's like carrying a chain around your soul, holding you back from peace and freedom. I never fully understood this until the moment I died. My name is Olivia Kelly. I was an ordinary person navigating life with its ups and downs. But on a spring morning in 2022, everything changed. An accident left me clinically dead for over 8 minutes. And in those moments, I was shown a truth about forgiveness that shattered everything I thought I knew. I'm not sharing this to simply tell a story. What I saw in those minutes will challenge you, inspire you, and perhaps even change how you see the act of forgiveness forever. Picture this. You're holding onto a grudge, a resentment so deeply embedded that it feels like a part of you. What if I told you that this invisible burden not only affects your soul, but also creates spiritual barriers that hold you back in ways you can't imagine? In those moments of death, I was transported to a realm of light, peace, and indescribable clarity. But as I drew closer to the divine presence, I felt an overwhelming heaviness, a reminder of the resentment I had carried for years. And then a voice spoke to me. You cannot enter fully into freedom while holding on to the chains of unforgiveness. This wasn't a simple message. It was a truth revealed through powerful visions that exposed the spiritual impact of forgiveness, not only on me, but on generations to come. In this video, I'll take you through what I saw, heard, and felt. I'll share how this experience transformed my relationships, my faith, and my life. But more importantly, I hope it transforms yours too. Because the truth is, forgiveness isn't just about letting go, it's about setting yourself free. The morning of, my accident started like any other. I was on my way to a meeting, my mind distracted by tasks and worries. The last thing I expected was to be moments away from death. I remember the impact vividly, the screech of tires, the crunch of metal, and then silence. What followed was not pain, but an eerie calm. I felt myself pulled from my body, as though floating above the wreckage. Paramedics worked frantically to revive me, but I was no longer there. Instead, I found myself in a tunnel of light. It wasn't just brightness. It was warmth, love, and peace, enveloping me completely. I felt no fear. I felt free. But as I moved closer to the end of the tunnel, something changed. A heaviness began to pull at me. It wasn't physical, but spiritual. A weight that seemed to wrap around me like chains. I heard a voice, powerful yet tender. Why are you carrying this burden? At first, I didn't understand. But then, like a mirror reflecting the depths of my soul, I saw it. Moments of unforgiveness that I had buried deep within myself. There was the argument with my father that left us estranged for years. The betrayal of a close friend that I never fully forgave. Even the small grudges I held on to. Each one appeared before me like stones in a backpack, weighing me down. In that moment, I realized something profound. These weren't just memories or emotions. They were spiritual chains, binding me, holding me back from fully entering the light. The voice spoke again, gentle but firm. Unforgiveness is not a weapon against others. It is a prison for your soul. As I stood there, confronted by this truth, I began to understand the gravity of what I had been shown. Each act of unforgiveness wasn't just affecting me. It was creating ripples in the spiritual realm, impacting my relationships, my future, and even my connection to God. The weight was real, and it was holding me back from experiencing true freedom. The voice continued, "Forgiveness is the key that unlocks these chains. It is not for others, it is for you. To forgive is to free yourself." I wanted to let go. I wanted to be free of the heaviness. But even in that divine space, I felt the resistance, the human instinct to cling to pain, to justify anger, to hold on to what feels like power but is truly poison. As I wrestled with these feelings, the light around me began to shift. Suddenly, I was no longer in the tunnel, but standing in what felt like an endless field of light and energy. Before me, I saw a vast tapestry, a web of golden threads connecting people, events, and emotions. Some threads shone brightly, radiating warmth and love. Others were dull, tangled, or frayed. The voice explained, "These threads represent the connections between souls. Forgiveness strengthens them, allowing love and healing to flow freely. Unforgiveness weakens them, creating barriers and distortions." I watched as scenes unfolded before me, moments of forgiveness that transformed lives. A mother embracing her estranged daughter, tears flowing as years of resentment melted away. A man releasing anger toward his childhood abuser, finding peace for the first time in decades. Each act of forgiveness caused a thread to glow brighter, sending ripples of light through the tapestry. It was as if the act of letting go didn't just heal the individual, but brought restoration to the connections around them. Then, I saw the opposite. Moments where unforgiveness festered, relationships that withered, opportunities lost, bitterness passed down like an inheritance. The threads dimmed, frayed, and snapped, leaving gaps in the web. The voice spoke again, this time with urgency. Every act of forgiveness restores the web. Every act of unforgiveness weakens it. You have the power to choose which legacy you leave. As I stood there, watching the tapestry shift and shimmer, I realized something that shook me to my core. Forgiveness isn't just a personal act. It's a spiritual responsibility. It wasn't just about me or my relationships. It was about contributing to a greater harmony, a divine design that connected us all. The voice then showed me my own thread. It was tangled and dim in places, weighed down by the grudges and resentments I had carried for years. "You have the power to restore this thread," the voice said. "But it begins with a choice." The choice felt monumental. Could I truly let go of the pain I had carried for so long? Could I release the anger and bitterness that had become so familiar? But as I stood in that place of divine clarity, I knew the answer. Forgiveness wasn't about excusing or forgetting. It was about freeing myself from the chains that held me back and stepping into the light of love and grace. The moment I chose to forgive, I felt an indescribable shift in the spiritual realm. It wasn't instant relief or an immediate wave of joy. Instead, it was like the weight I had carried began to loosen, one link at a time. The voice guided me gently, saying, "Forgiveness is not a single act. It is a process, a journey. Each step you take toward it strengthens your spirit and restores the broken threads of your life." Suddenly, I was shown a series of visions. Each one was a moment in my life where forgiveness was needed, but I had chosen instead to hold on to resentment. The first vision was of my father. We had a falling out years ago. Disagreement over something so small, yet it had spiraled into years of silence. In the vision, I saw him sitting alone, holding a photograph of our family. His eyes were heavy with regret. His shoulders slumped with the weight of unspoken words. I realized that my unforgiveness wasn't just hurting me, it was hurting him too. The voice spoke. "Forgiveness doesn't erase the pain, but it creates space for healing. When you forgive, you release both yourself and the other person from the chains of the past." The scene shifted, and I saw a close friend who had betrayed me years ago. The memory was still raw, and even in this divine space, I felt the sting of that wound. But the vision didn't focus on the betrayal. Instead, it showed me the ripple effects of my unforgiveness, how my inability to let go had caused me to distance myself from others, to build walls of mistrust that kept people at arm's length. Again, the voice spoke. "Unforgiveness is a barrier, not just between you and others, but between you and the fullness of my love. To forgive is to open the door to freedom. Each vision was like a mirror, reflecting the ways I had allowed unforgiveness to shape my life. But with each revelation, I felt a choice, a chance to let go. The voice encouraged me. Start small. Speak forgiveness into existence, even if your heart isn't fully there yet. The act of releasing will eventually align with your soul. In that moment, I spoke the words out loud. I forgive you, Dad. I forgive my friend. I forgive myself. With each word, I felt the chains loosening further. The light around me grew brighter, and I sensed a deep peace beginning to take root within me. But the voice reminded me, the enemy will try to bring these chains back. Forgiveness must be a daily choice, a discipline of the heart. As I continued this journey, the visions shifted. This time, I was shown the incredible power of forgiveness, not just in my life, but in the lives of others. I saw a mother who had forgiven the drunk driver who took her child's life. Her forgiveness didn't erase her grief, but it allowed her to find peace and even extend compassion to others who were hurting. I saw a man who forgave his abusive father, breaking a cycle of generational trauma. His forgiveness didn't condone the abuse, but it freed him from becoming bitter and allowed him to build a family rooted in love and kindness. Each act of forgiveness was like a spark, igniting a flame that spread to those around them. It was as if forgiveness had the power to not only heal the individual, but to transform entire communities. The voice explained, forgiveness is a divine act. When you forgive, you partner with heaven to bring restoration to the world. You may never see the full impact of your forgiveness, but know this: every act of letting go sends ripples through eternity. Then I was shown something that left me in awe. I saw my own future. I saw the relationships that would be restored, the opportunities that would open, and the peace that would fill my heart if I continued to walk the path of forgiveness. But I also saw the alternative. If I chose to hold on to resentment, I would see relationships deteriorate, opportunities slip away, and a heaviness settle over my life like a shadow. The choice was clear. The voice spoke one last time. Forgiveness is not about what others deserve. It's about what you are willing to release to step into the fullness of my grace. When you forgive, you reflect my heart and my love. With those words, the vision began to fade. The light around me grew softer, and I felt myself being pulled back into my body. The next thing I remember was the sound of machines beeping and muffled voices around me. I opened my eyes slowly, and the bright lights of the hospital room came into focus. For a moment, I felt disoriented, unsure if what I had experienced was a dream, a hallucination, or something more. But as the memory of the visions returned, I knew without a doubt that what I had seen and heard was real. A nurse leaned over me, her face a mix of shock and relief. "You're awake," she said softly. "We didn't think you'd make it." The doctors soon gathered, explaining that my heart had stopped for over 8 minutes. Clinically, I had been dead. Yet, here I was, alive and completely lucid. They called it a miracle, unable to explain how I had survived without brain damage or other complications. But as they spoke, my mind wasn't on their words. It was on the profound peace I felt. The heaviness I had carried for years, the grudges, the bitterness, was gone. For the first time in my life, my soul felt light, unburdened, and free. I knew I had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at living with a heart transformed by the power of forgiveness. Over the next few days, as I recovered physically, the spiritual truths I had seen became even clearer. I began to reflect on how I would apply them in my life. It wasn't enough to have witnessed the power of forgiveness. I needed to live it out. One of the first things I did was reach out to my father. The call was emotional, filled with tears and apologies on both sides. For years, we had allowed a small disagreement to create a chasm between us. But in that moment, we chose to let it go. As we spoke, I could almost feel the high, spiritual thread between us being restored, glowing brighter with each word of reconciliation. I also reached out to the friend who had betrayed me. This time, forgiveness wasn't about rekindling the friendship. It was about freeing myself from the resentment I had held onto for so long. When I told them, "I forgive you," I felt a release, as if a burden I didn't even realize I was carrying had been lifted. The most difficult act of forgiveness, however, was forgiving myself. Throughout my life, I had been my harshest critic, holding on to guilt and shame for past mistakes. But the voice I had heard during my near-death experience echoed in my mind. Forgiveness is not about what you deserve. It's about releasing yourself from chains. In prayer and reflection, I began to extend grace to myself, understanding that holding on to self-condemnation only kept me from fully embracing the life I was called to live. My near-death experience wasn't just a moment of spiritual awakening. It was a call to action. I realized that forgiveness isn't just a one-time decision. It's a daily practice, a discipline that requires intentionality and humility. As I began to share my story with others, I noticed how deeply it resonated. People would come to me, opening up about their own struggles with forgiveness. Some carried wounds from decades ago, others from recent betrayals. But the common thread was the same. Unforgiveness had held them captive, robbing them of peace and joy. One story stands out to me. A woman approached me after hearing my testimony and shared how she had been estranged from her brother for over 20 years. They had stopped speaking after a family argument, and the bitterness had only grown over time. She told me that my story had given her the courage to reach out to him. Weeks later, she wrote to me, saying they had reconciled. Her words brought tears to my eyes. "For the first time in decades, I feel free. Thank you for reminding me of the power of forgiveness." Moments like these reinforced what I had seen in my visions. Forgiveness is a divine act that creates ripples far beyond what we can see. I also began to understand the connection between forgiveness and spiritual growth. Each time I chose to forgive, whether for a small slight or a deep wound, I felt my spirit strengthen. It was as if each act of letting go brought me closer to the light I had experienced in the other realm. Forgiveness also transformed my worship and prayer life. I realized that harboring resentment had created barriers in my relationship with God. But now, with those chains broken, I felt a deeper connection, a clearer sense of His presence and love. In one of my prayers, I asked God why forgiveness was so powerful. The answer I felt in my spirit was simple yet profound, because forgiveness reflects my heart. Jesus had shown me during my near-death experience that forgiveness wasn't just a moral choice, it was a spiritual weapon. It breaks chains, restores relationships, and creates space for healing and transformation. Now, I live each day with a renewed sense of purpose. My life isn't perfect, and I still face challenges. But the peace I've found through forgiveness has become my anchor. Before my experience, I thought forgiveness was about weakness or surrender. Now I know it's the ultimate act of strength and freedom. As I close this chapter of my story, I want to leave you with a question. Who do you need to forgive? Is it a family member, a friend, or even yourself? The choice is yours, but I can promise you this. When you choose forgiveness, you choose freedom.